Hey, Steve Zucker, welcome back to Pokes Your Channel. Hey, I want to do a little video here that I think will be helpful to a lot of people, which is how to buy a used guitar. I'm going to touch upon some things that you may have seen in other videos and some things you may not have seen, but these are things that I've used for the last 30 years plus, and I hope some of this will be valuable information to you. This is obviously a brand new guitar, but this is a Lohr LH280, kind of a 175 type guitar, great guitar. It's about $4.99. But anyway, let me just get right to it. One of the first things you want to do when you buy a used guitar, because it's very, very easy to miss things, you take your fingers, and this will kind of guide your mind and your eyes, and you actually go around the guitar with your fingers, looking for cracks, looking for places where, and I'm talking used guitars, but you could do this with new as well if you want, looking for places where there might be cracks or maybe where the binding's coming out, whatnot. And that doesn't mean, by the way, it still might not be a guitar you might want to buy, but these are things you want to look for. If you use your fingers and actually kind of just lightly, you don't even have to touch the guitar, just kind of move around the guitar, it's going to force your mind to look at all the different areas, because I think anybody who's honest has bought a guitar, gotten home later and said, oh my God, there was a little crack over here I didn't see. So that's why it's important to take your fingers and kind of go into the different areas. You also want to look at the back of the guitar. You want to check the headstock to make sure there's no really light little cracks that go across here. Look here, look at the neck. Again, use your hands to kind of guide your mind and your eyes to look at different areas. Look at where the joint here, where the neck connects to the body, and make sure that's secure. Now with used guitars, especially older guitars made in the 50s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, or 40s or 30s, obviously, there's a few other things you really want to look out for. One thing is if you're looking at, like, say, an old Martin or something, and say you're looking, now this obviously does not have the right kind of bridge. Say you're looking at an old Martin that has a wooden bridge with a little plastic saddle. If that saddle is sanded down super, super low to where there's only just a little bit of saddle left on that old Martin or old Takamine or old Alvarez or whatever the heck it might be, old Gibson, it probably needs a neck reset. Because what happens, and it's very difficult to see this, but the neck starts to shift away from the body and the neck shifts this way. Like I said, you can't see some big gap there, but what happens is the neck starts to shift, and the neck actually moves down this way. So as the neck moves down towards the guitar, it makes the action higher. That's why people sand the McGeebers out of that saddle on an old Martin or whatever. So if you see an old vintage guitar, and like I said, there's hardly any saddle left at all, that doesn't mean it might not be a good buy or a good guitar, but it probably needs a neck reset. You don't have to do the neck reset. But if somebody tells you, oh yeah, it's a great guitar, it's fine, you just need to lower the saddle. Well, if there's no saddle left to lower, it's going to be hard to lower. So if you see an old vintage guitar with very little saddle, oftentimes it does need a neck reset, which is very expensive, depending on who you have do it, okay? Also, when you buy a used guitar, you want to look down the neck. Some people like to get a straight edge, like a metal ruler or something. And most necks aren't perfect, by the way. Most necks have a little bit of relief, meaning a little bit of, this kind of an angle. Obviously not a ton, but, it's off. A little bit of relief is not a bad thing. But you kind of hold the guitar like this. You look here, and then you look down towards the end of the fretboard and try to see a straight line. And it should look relatively straight. Again, there's no, a lot of fretboards aren't perfect. But if you see a big, huge kind of banana type dip, you might want to avoid it. Some people, when they sell used guitars, oh, it just needs a little adjustment. Sometimes a neck adjustment from the truss rod, and when you're doing truss rod adjustments, by the way, don't just tighten it first. Loosen it first and then tighten just a very small amount. And if it's really, really hard to do, you might want maybe just don't do it. You might end up breaking the truss rod, and that's a very expensive fix. But you want to loosen it first and then tighten just a very small amount. And some necks, if they haven't been adjusted for years, will adjust. Some won't. It's very difficult. I've bought used guitars before where I've said, well, the neck looks pretty bad. It might adjust, it might not. And the guy looked at me like I was just trying to work him. I wasn't, because I've had guitars that I've purchased used where the necks, you just almost were frozen like that. So you have to be very, very careful. That's one of the advantages of buying a new guitar, by the way. But there are a lot of good, used values out there. So obviously you want to check all the tuning keys to make sure all the different tuners work. And this might seem a little laborious, but this is all stuff that can really help you out. Make sure they all work. If you're playing a note and it's not ringing out clearly, it could be pinched here in the nut, which means you need to have some luthier open that up or file it up a little bit. In fact, I just had somebody do it, Hugh down at 13th Street Guitars on an L8 700 of mine. What else? So used guitars. Again, I think the most important thing, like I said, you know, a lot, just because a guitar, now the action, see, action is how high the strings are off the fretboard. See, this is pretty good. If the action's super, super, super high on a used guitar and the saddle is down real low, I would walk away. It sounds like a nightmare. It could be a $400 or $500, you know, neck reset. If the action's high, but there's a lot of, and let me get another guitar. If the action's high and there's a lot of saddle left, well then, you know, then you have something to work with, right? Like, see, here's a guitar here. See, there's quite a bit of saddle here. Now this is obviously a nylon string, but see, there's quite a bit of saddle here. So in other words, if I wanted to lower this action, I could have a luthier take this out and sand the bottom of it. But if you're looking at like an old Alvarez made in Japan, which are nice guitars, and old Takamine or old Gibson or old Martin, and this is down, like there's hardly any of it left, that's not a good sign. If it's playable like that, you might want to get it. I'd talk them down a little bit more. But it could need a neck reset for $400 or $500, so it's very, very, very common. Also, in terms of used guitars, you want to play every freaking note, and I do mean every note, because oftentimes what happens is frets. Now, I'm not going to play every note here. Oftentimes frets will start to come up a little bit. Sometimes just taking a soft hammer and tapping them down will work. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes I need, you know, fret dressing or whatever. So I mean, you got these are things you want to take into account when you look at a guitar. And if you're thinking about buying a used guitar and it's got some of these issues, use that to negotiate, because I mean, you might have to turn around and spend $60, $80, $130, depending on what it needs to get it dialed in. So, you know, I mean, with me, I prefer, if I'm going to buy a used guitar, I really don't want to buy any major issues. That's why, like I said, you want, a lot of times people there'll be a crack on the back of a guitar and they'll say, oh, it's just surface level crack, you know. It could be true and it could not be true. There's a lot of BS in the guitar game. There's some people that will say whatever to sell a guitar. Like I said, you also want to look at where the neck meets the body here. Make sure if there's a ton of glue and stuff in a little space like this, I'd walk away. Somebody obviously did a Mickey Mouse job. What else? I mean, the most important thing, though, really the most important thing, like I said, move your hand over the whole guitar, and as you're moving your hand, use your eyes and follow where your hand is, because it's really easy to miss something. You want to, you know, every little part of the guitar, take your hand and go like this, you know, go around the binding, look at the binding. Again, I've bought some guitars that had a crack or two. I've bought guitars that have had a little loose binding, whatever. But you take that into account when you negotiate with somebody, and what you're trying to avoid is major stuff, like does it need a neck reset? You know, do all the tuners work? You know, things like that. You know, are you going to have a lot of fret work done? So these are and obviously, you know, sometimes you can buy a used guitar, and sometimes right out of the gate, that used guitar will actually play really, really well and everything. Sometimes they won't. So you take that into account. You might have to spend $60, $70 on a nice setup. So you have to take that into account. But again, you want to make sure there's not like I mean, especially with older guitars, there's not a ton of glue where the neck meets the body. That's a really bad sign that somebody Mickey Mouse something. You want to make sure on a used guitar that the saddle isn't super, super low, because it probably needs a neck reset. I know I'm kind of summarizing here. You want to sight the neck. You want to look down the neck and kind of look here, and then have your eye over here. The neck should be relatively straight. If it has a little bit of a dip, that's okay. But if it's like a banana, you might want to avoid it, because that could be a major issue. And if it's a guitar that, like I said, an old vintage guitar with very low saddle, then that probably means it needs a neck reset. But like I said, you know, the guitar, that's why I buy used guitars, but that's seriously why I recommend people buy the new Recording Kings from me, because you got a warranty, they're dialed in. Sometimes you have to do maybe some minor adjustments if you want the action lower or higher. But, you know, for major things, you've got a warranty, and that's kind of nice to have. But I'm not saying buying used guitars is not a viable thing. Buying used guitars can be very, very cool. but you have to kind of get yourself into a habit of looking over the whole guitar. Again, take your fingers and go around the guitar, and as you're going around the guitar with your fingers, have your eye matching where your fingers are. Look for cracks, okay, because it's very, very easy to miss something, and so you want to do that. And if you're buying a guitar from a shop, ask if it comes, you know, with a setup, or ask what it needs. Now, when I sell my new guitars like Recording Kings or Lores or whatever, most of the time they're pretty well dialed in. If somebody wants a little bit lower action, I just tell them up front, yeah, you may want to take the saddle out and sand the bottom of it. You can do it yourself. It's very easy. Or pay somebody $25, $30. It's not a complete. You don't always have to get a complete setup, is what I'm trying to say. But I do believe in setups. It can be the best money you've ever spent on a setup. But if you're negotiating to buy a used guitar and it does need a setup, use that in your negotiating posture. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's true. Just tell the guy, look, I like the guitar. I wouldn't mind buying it, but I might have to spend 60, 70, 80 bucks having it set up. I'm not a luthier, so how about we knock 70 bucks off the price or whatever. So those are things you want to keep in mind. You want to play every note. Oh, also you want to check the intonation. Now, most intonation is not perfect. Wes Montgomery even said that guitar is an imperfect instrument. Like with most nylon string guitars, you need a compensated bridge, meaning there's a bridge where it kind of comes out in different places to make it better intonation. Most steel string guitars, the intonation isn't perfect. It depends how good your ear is. But that's not, as long as the intonation isn't like really off like that on an acoustic guitar. But I'm just saying, if you have a really good ear, guitar is not a perfect instrument. Intonation on acoustic guitars often is not perfect. But if it's good enough to where the octaves sound pretty good, then you're cool. So like I said, make sure every note is playable. Make sure that you don't have a super huge dip to the neck. Make sure the neck is not twisted, like you look down at like this. Make sure it's not some major doop, you know what I mean? But again, there are necks that are really, really good, but a lot of great guitars don't have perfect necks, but they're still great guitars. But the main thing, like I said, go over every inch of the guitar with your hands. Run your hands down different areas of the guitar, and as you're doing that, look at the guitar for cracks. Look for loose binding, things like that, because even loose binding is not the easiest thing to fix if you don't do that yourself. So if you find a lot of issues on a guitar, bring that up in the negotiation. Say, look, I've got loose binding to fix. I've got to have a setup. I got to do, and use that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because those are real issues. And it just takes a little bit of time. And also look for sound. I mean, there's some used guitars that just have a really, really great tone, and they just have a certain vibe. You can hear it. They have an orchestral balance and an organic bloom, and some used guitars are just sound kind of compressed, kind of tubby. They just don't sound good. So listen to the guitar and ask yourself. I mean, a great guitar will shine through even with old strings. So just listen to the guitar and everything like that. And those are just a few very, very helpful tips. And don't feel guilty about negotiating with somebody, because oftentimes, you may have to put a little bit of money into it. You may not. It depends on the guitar. Also, look at the person you're buying the guitar from. Do they seem like the kind of person that is a straight shooter? Do they seem to be kind of like an FBI profiler? Look at the person you're buying the guitar from. Do they seem like somebody who's a good guy, who's not just lying to you? Because if you're ever looking at a guitar where the price is absolutely insanely cheap for what it is, like a really great Gibson Les Paul for $500-600, maybe the guitar's hot. If the guy's acting real nervous, if he's real jittery and tweaky and kind of speedy, you might want to walk away from that one. So these are all things to keep in mind. But there are some great values out there. But like I said, I mean, a lot of people that contact me, that's why people buy guitars from me, because I really know guitars and I go over them and make sure there's no major issues. And I make sure it's a great guitar, because guitars vary greatly from guitar to guitar. Very greatly. I don't care if it's the same model. Some have a great sound, some have an organic bloom, secondary bloom, good overtone. Some of them sound compressed and tubby. There's a lot of things, and a lot of this you learn by doing. But if you take some of those guidelines, that can be very, very helpful in buying a used guitar. And if you don't want to worry about all those headaches, you can buy a new one. I carry the whole, you can look at themusiclink.net. I carry the whole line of Recording King flat tops, which are huge value, and the Lore arch tops. And so it's all up to what you want to do. Some people like the fact that you get a lifetime warranty and everything like that. So feel free to call me. It's 714-548-0385, or email me, Steve Zook, the number 7, not spelled out, STEVEZOOK, the number 7 at yahoo.com. But yeah, buying used guitars can be great, but like I don't have a lot of time to chase them anymore. So the used guitars that I do have, usually so. I think I sold one this morning. I sold a Joe Pass Epiphone. I just don't have a lot of time to chase them. But keep those things in mind when looking for a used guitar. Like I said, and good luck in your ventures, and we'll catch you on the next video. And if you want a sample of the guitar ladder, send me an email to stevezook7@yahoo.com. I'll send you a free sample. Take care. Keep the positive faith. Remember, the universe is unfolding in time, not unraveling. Stay positive. It puts you into alignment with the perfection of the universe. Ciao.